Although weaving in ends is usually the last thing we do to finish a knit or crochet project, it's just as important to get right as the stitch itself. The statement last but not least definitely applies here. So how do I make sure my ends stay hidden? First, I make sure to leave myself enough of an end to work with in the first place. It's really easy to short yourself, especially on the slip knot side, and not leave as much of a tail as you need. My first rule of thumb is to always leave at least 6 inches to work with. That's on the slip knot and on the bind off. Anything less and I'm usually kicking myself later. Second, I always run the tail through the base of a row of stitches, for crochet at least. It changes slightly for knitting and I'll get to that in just a bit. So this portion of the project is one that will stretch the least. So there's less of a chance of seeing the end when it gets used. Third, and this is why I start with at least 6 inches, I always run the end back and forth at least 3 times. More is better, less is not as good. At least 3 times will make sure you have enough woven in so that when it stretches with use, the end won't eventually work itself out over time. Fourth, I get a little messy with it. When you run the needle through the yarn and split it, it tends to hold on to the end a little better, and I find it stays put much better with use, so there's a lot less unweaving as the project is stretched or worn or used. Fifth, I use a bent tip needle. Now, I used to see this one as more personal preference, but it's become even more important in my eyes, especially for knitters. The bent tip allows you to do all of which I just mentioned a little bit easier. It puts the tip of the needle in exactly the right position. Now, these are pretty cheap and you can find them at most craft stores, but I will have a link to a couple options from Amazon in the description below if you'd rather order them online. For all the examples you've seen so far, I've been working with smooth yarn, but what about a fuzzy yarn like this one? Well, my routine honestly doesn't change. I start with a long tail, I weave it in at the base of a row of stitches, using my fingers to feel where that is since I can't actually see it, and I run it back and forth a few times using my trusty bent tip needle. The only difference with all of this is that it works even better because the yarn is fuzzy. It sort of clings to itself, which is nice, plus the fuzz hides any possible messiness. So usually its worst quality is also its best quality. So what about knitting? The only thing that changes with knitting is my second tip, running the yarn at the base of the stitches. Since knit stitches are a little different, we can't actually do that. So instead, what I do is weave the yarn around the stitches, and this is where the bent tip needle really shines. It makes the process so much easier. No matter if it's a knit or a purl, you can always weave the yarn around the stitch, and it nearly disappears. Now, if there's one thing I've learned over the years, it's that practice makes better. And these tips will give you a jump start. So just to recap, number 1, always start with at least a 6-inch tail. Number 2, run it under a row of stitches for crochet or around the stitches for knitting. Number 3, run it back and forth at least 3 times. Number 4, split the yarn with the needle if you can, and this works better for crochet honestly than knitting. And number 5, use a bent tip needle to make it all easier. If you found this video helpful, would you mind hitting the like button? Not only does that let me know I'm making videos that you enjoy watching, but it also tells YouTube that this video is worth sharing to others who are also struggling to weave in ends like a pro. Want an ad-free experience? How about the ability to enjoy all B.Hooked content before anyone else? Members of my Patreon community not only get to watch all videos completely free of ads, but they also get the PDF for all new patterns. Choose the Insider Preview tier for these perks, or if you really love patterns, choose the Insider Plus tier to unlock an additional 76 classic B.Hooked PDFs, as well as the entire archive of patterns released in 2021. Join my Patreon community today for all of these perks, as well as customized pattern support if you need it. You can cancel at any time if your financial situation changes, or if you simply change your mind. Links in the description below. Also, if you have a different tip, leave that in the comments so we can make this one big resource to help others weave in ends. And since you got this far, thank you. I appreciate you spending your time watching this video all the way through. If you still need a yarn fix, don't worry, I have you covered. I think you'll find one of these videos helpful as well. Happy hooking, and I'll see you in the next one.